Welcome to Miss Martin Muses and more Catholic splaining. Prepare yourself, you're about to be Catholic splained. What are we Catholic splaining? It is the 10 commandments. Yes, we are precious. We are going to be going through all 10 of them, but today just the introduction. And by the way, happy feast of the presentation of the Lord, the official end of Christmas, Candlemas, all of that. So if you kept up your decorations in your tree, well done. But after today, that will all be over. And we have a month until Lent. Let's dig into the 10 commandments and what the Catholic Church has to say, more specifically, the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So, when you see CCC, that is referring Catechism of the Catholic Church, and it is 2055. Now, they're talking about the Lord when people went to Jesus and were asking about the 10 commandments. When someone asks him, Jesus, which commandment in the law is the greatest? Jesus replies, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. The Decalogue, or 10 Commandments, must be interpreted in light of this twofold yet single commandment of love, the fullness of the law. So let's make this very clear. This is how we interpret the 10 commandments with what Jesus says. The commandments: you shall not commit adultery, you shall not kill, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this sentence: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. So this is all rooted in love. Love of self, love of neighbor, love of God, all that good stuff. This is CCC 2056. The word Decalogue literally means 10 words. God revealed these 10 words to his people on the holy mountain. They were written with the finger of God, in quotes. God the Father doesn't have a corporal body, unlike the other commandments written by Moses. So there was a whole bunch of stuff that Moses conveys to the people of God. But the 10 commandments are the super duper ones. They are preeminently the words of God. They are handed on to us in the books of Exodus and Deuteronomy. Beginning with the Old Testament, the sacred books refer to the 10 words, but it is in the new covenant in Jesus Christ that their full meaning will be revealed. Now, some people are like, wait a second, where do you get off, saying that it's fulfilled in Jesus Christ? Well, we're Christians. So that's why I'm saying this is Catholicsplaining. This is from a Catholic point of view. Obviously, many other people see it differently, but because we believe in Jesus Christ and New Testament, all of that, the new covenant, this is how we interpret and say it must be interpreted. 2058. These 10 words, the 10 words, sum up and proclaim God's law. These words the Lord spoke to all your assembly at the mountain out of the midst of the fire, the cloud, and the thick darkness with a loud voice, and he added no more. And he wrote them upon 2 tablets of stone and gave them to me. 10 Commandments movie does that pretty fun way. For this reason, these 2 tablets are called the testimony. I think that they have a typo there. In fact, they contain the terms of the covenant concluded between God and his people. These tables of the testimony were to be deposited in the Ark of the Covenant. You see, it's all connected, to use the phrase from Manifest, the TV show. Catechism of Catholic Church 2059. The 10 words are pronounced by God in the midst of a theophany. The Lord spoke with you face to face at the mountain out of the midst of the fire. They belong to God's revelation of himself and his glory. See, this is huge. What was revealed through these 10 words. God's revelation of himself and his glory to his people in the Old Covenant. The gift of the commandments is the gift of God himself and his holy will. In making his will known, God reveals himself to his people. I am not a theologian, so don't hate on me, but I believe one could call that an epiphany. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. Catechism of the Catholic Church 2064. Infidelity to Scripture and in conformity with the example of Jesus. The tradition of the church has acknowledged the primordial, I tell you, importance and significance of the Decalogue. See, this is something that sometimes people don't understand, is that so much of what we do and what we are is based on the 10 commandments, and we are obliged to hold to the 10 commandments, if for no other reason Jesus tells us to and helps us understand them. But yeah, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other God before me. You shall not take the name of the Lord in vain. You shall keep the Sabbath. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not lie. You shall not steal. You shall not covet. All of that. And I think I got them completely out of order and might have skipped through one or two. Tell you what you learn when you're young is what stays in your head, because there is a different numbering that those in congregations that derive from the Reformation have, and that's the one I memorized. I will eventually memorize the Catholic one, eventually. I think Lutherans also use the same numberings we do, some Lutherans, and I think some Anglicans. But if I'm wrong or if I'm right, let me know in the comments. Primordial importance and significance of the Decalogue. 2067. The 10 Commandments state what is required in the love of God and love of neighbor. So if you know, how do I love God? How do I love my neighbor? This is how you do it. The first 3 commandments concern love of God, and the other 7, love of neighbor. Now think about that. Have you ever thought about when you lie, you are actually committing an act of unlove against your neighbor? It's a form of unkindness and an injustice. When you are telling the truth, you are actually loving your neighbor. Now, go to some of the vices and the and the virtues to know you also got to be prudent about it too. That's why we like prudence. But that is a discussion for another day. CCC 2068. The Council of Trent teaches that the 10 Commandments are obligatory for Christians and that the justified man is still bound to keep them. That's what I was just saying. And there's a reason why the Council of Trent had to say so. The Council of Trent was during the Catholic Reformation, which was going on simultaneously with the Reformation, what people call the Reformation. Sometimes people call it the Counter-Reformation, but historians now tend to go with the Catholic Reformation because it did begin before Martin Luther. However, the reason why the church had to reiterate this was because there was an attitude that the justified man does not have to necessarily follow the 10 Commandments. It's a whole other story for another day. We still argue about it today, all the different denominations, so I'm not going into that right now. But the Council of Trent teaches we are obliged to keep the 10 Commandments and that the justified man is still bound to them. So if you even say, I'm justified, yes, congratulations, you still have to keep the 10 Commandments. You cannot sin. Okay? Sin is still sin. The Second Vatican Council confirms the bishops, successors of the apostles, received from the Lord the mission of teaching all peoples and of preaching the gospel to every creature, so that all men may attain salvation through faith, baptism, and the observance of the commandments. Second Vatican Council and the Council of Trent had to do that. Now, understand that this doesn't mean that it wasn't held by the church, but usually when the church defines something in a council, or the Pope has to define something using papal infallibility, very rare, by the way, It's because there's a challenge and there's a need of clarity. 2069. The Decalogue forms a coherent whole. Each word refers to each of the others and to all of them. They reciprocally condition one another. See, they work together. It's all connected. The two tables shed light on one another. They form an organic unity. To transgress one commandment is to infringe all the others. Again, it's all connected. You can't say, well, I'm going to just lie and that'll be cool. No, it affects everything else. Or commit adultery. I mean, think about it. Think about the effects of that on everything. All right? It's a mess. One cannot honor another person without blessing God, his creator. One cannot adore God without loving all men, his creatures. And sometimes that's very hard to do. All right? So that's why if you are a Christian, especially a Catholic Christian, you cannot honor another person without blessing God, the creator, but you cannot adore God without loving all men. So you can't pull this, well, I'm going to be a jerk to this person because they have it coming, but I'm still a Christian. No, you are, but you aren't. Okay. But you're sinning and putting your salvation at risk, frankly. The first will be last and the last will be first. You have to love all men and his creatures. The Decalogue brings man's religious and social life into unity. And when, especially a Christian, breaks these 10 commandments, it is a scandal. It is a scandal to the community, especially if it's someone in leadership. Remember, there were 12 apostles, and all of them deserted Jesus except John. And, we had Judas. Judas was a bishop. They can sin. 2070. The 10 Commandments belong to God's revelation. It's God revealing himself to us. At the same time, they teach us the true humanity of man. Ooh, I love this. We're starting to get to natural law, what is written on the human heart. They bring to light the essential duties, and therefore, when you see therefore, always ask what it's there for. And therefore, indirectly, the fundamental rights inherent in the nature of the human person. The Decalogue contains a privileged expression of the natural law. And now we're going to quote St. Irenaeus, early church father. From the beginning, God had implanted in the heart of man the precepts of the natural law. Then he was content to remind him of them. This was the Decalogue. So when we talk about things that are written on the human heart, for example, you've never heard of God or anything like that, 10 Commandments. You're minding your own business out in the middle of nowhere with your people. You still know deep in your heart it's wrong to murder. Okay? It's wrong to steal. Okay? You don't need God to tell you that. However, he was reminding them of that and showing them the coherence of all that was owed to God and neighbor. It is written on the human heart. So, not having been told, it is not an excuse. It can mitigate the guilt, for example, but no, it's written on the human heart. The commandments of the Decalogue, although accessible to reason alone, you see, there we go. It is accessible to reason alone. They have been revealed. To attain a complete and certain understanding of the requirements of natural law, sinful humanity needed this revelation. This is my personal dogma that I call God is not a jerk. Okay? He's not going to leave you guessing about what he wants of you. All right? It's not secret. He comes down and knocks us over the head and says, hello, McFly, this is what you're supposed to do. 2072. Since they express man's fundamental duties toward God and toward his neighbor, the 10 Commandments reveal in their primordial content grave obligations. I've talked about that before, that we are obligated to keep them and keep them in a grave matter, because when you are breaking one of the 10 commandments, since it is grave matter, you are potentially getting into mortal sin. It's not something to just be shrugged off. Grave obligations, all of them are grave obligations. Ugh, coveting, that's a hard one. They are fundamentally immutable, and they oblige always and everywhere. No one can dispense from them. The 10 commandments are engraved by God in the human heart. Speaking of putting things in people's faces, it's like, just in case you didn't know, we're going to say it 1,000 times. And the catechism also then gives a little bit of a summary of this. So this is a little bit of an introduction into the 10 commandments. Next week, we're going to be going through each one. We're going to be starting with, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other God before me. So there. So we're going to maybe get into some other theologians with these things, because it really is deep. Like, at first you think it's simple, and then the more you go into it, it's not. So there it is. There it is. That's a little bit of an introduction to the 10 commandments. And let me know in the comments what I got right, what I got wrong, or what I may have left out. I am going to enjoy going on this journey with you. So have a great day, everyone. Have a great day, and be certain to know your commandments.